Hi class, here's a quick guide to Milestone 2 Assignment 5.2. It is a discussion board assignment, so if there's any question there about this, you will be submitting your assignment within the discussion board forum. So here we're looking at the guidelines and rubric for the assignment. This is a milestone assignment, so it's leading right up to your final project. It's important to keep in mind that your final projects are not actual studies. You're simply going to propose a hypothetical study. You will not be gathering participants or data in any way. You won't be actually conducting the study. It's just a proposal of a hypothetical study that you feel would be appropriate in order to answer your research question. So keeping that in mind, in your initial post, I'd like you to address the following. And there are 5 elements that I'd like you to make sure to address. The first is, what research design have you chosen to address your research question? Explain your reasoning for choosing it and why is it appropriate. So in Module 4, you developed a research question based on a research gap. And here I'd like you to think of what research design would be best suited to answer that question. So I would like for you to restate your research question here and then identify what research design would be most appropriate. Your research design could be correlational, experimental, observational, longitudinal, cross-sectional. It could be a case study. Whatever it is, you would identify that very clearly here and explain why you chose it and why it's appropriate. For example, if you think a correlational study is best suited for your research design, in order to answer your research question, you might say, I chose a correlational research design because I'd like to explore the relationship between variable A and variable B, and I'm planning to gather data via questionnaires, and for those reasons I find that it is the most appropriate research design. So as simple as that, basically what's your research question and what research design clearly identified would best answer that research question and why. Second question is, how have you built upon the initial research design ideas you came up with in the Module 2 discussion? So here is a quick reflection to Module 2, and some of you had really developed research ideas, some of you had less developed ideas. And in answering this, I'd just like you to quickly reflect and see what sorts of ideas are new for you at this point in comparison to what you wrote in that module. You might have not been clear about what research design to use, and now you've decided on a certain path. And you would just indicate that here, anything that you have built upon. The third point that I'd like you to address is, what new elements are you adding to your research design based on the Module 4 Research Gap Worksheet activity? So as you recall, in this worksheet, you were to think of a research gap based on the literature review that you did, and create a research question based on that gap. So the new elements here would be based on the gap that you discovered. For example, if the gap that you discovered was that a certain culture, for example, wasn't represented in the research, and you'd like to, and your research question might have something to do about addressing this cultural gap, your research design would then have to include an element of maybe sending out questionnaires to this particular culture to include them in the study. So however way your research design has changed based on your research gap, or and not necessarily changed, but how you have kind of expanded your research design or to include this research gap. That is what I'm looking for here. The fourth question is, how will your research design be implemented? In other words, how are you going to conduct your study? If you're going to use questionnaires, make sure you go in depth of how you're going to um, distribute this questionnaire, to whom you will distribute this questionnaire. So who are your participants? How will you get them? And so forth. Last question, how will you account for any issues of ethics in your proposed research question? So here you'll include any ethical issues that you might run into. And last week I posted a video about ethical considerations that might be helpful in you answering this question. Will you be using informed consent? Will confidentiality be maintained? If you're conducting an experiment, will you be allowing participants to withdraw at any time? How will you be protecting the participants from any harm? Things of that nature, based on the ethics code of the APA. So those are the 5 elements to be included in your initial post. In your response posts, let me go back a little. In responding to these 5 points, I'd like you to make sure to use references to back up your ideas. Doing so is very good practice in strengthening your thoughts, and I'd like to see all of you do this in this assignment. In your response post, I'd like you to critique the pros and cons of your peers' research designs that they have chosen and support your answer by examples from your own analysis of research design within this course. So I'd like you to respond to at least 2 of your classmates and critique the pros and cons of their research designs and provide some examples to back up your ideas. Now, in terms of when these assignments, your initial and response posts are due, is just like any other discussion board posts. Your initial posts are due Thursday and your response posts are due this Sunday. Now, your initial post, I'd like you to make sure to keep this in mind. Your initial post should be between 1 to 2 paragraphs. Any more than 2 paragraphs is really too long to provide any sort of thoughtful and thorough feedback to, as your peers have to respond to 2 posts. So I keep it to less than 2 paragraphs and more than 1 paragraph. Here's the rubric. As you can see, this will be graded just like any other discussion board with the elements of comprehension, timeliness, engagement, and writing. So that is it. If you have any questions, please let me know through email or the discussion board forum. I'm looking forward to reading all of your research ideas.